You are lying on a cold dirt floor, your body weak, your belly swollen with another child. This is your fourth pregnancy in just 6 years, and you are only 17 years old. Childhood ended for you long ago, replaced by a life you never chose. None of your children are with you anymore. The first one, a boy, was taken when he was 3. You still remember the warmth of his small body against yours, and the way he cried when they pulled him away. That sound never left you. It lives in your memory, in your dreams. In the quiet moments when everything else fades, your second child, a girl, was taken even earlier. She was sent away before she could form words, before she could truly know you. Somewhere far away, she grew up without your voice, without your arms, without your name attached to hers. In the records, she was never your daughter. She was listed as property, reduced to numbers and value. Your third child never had a chance to live. Violence took her before she could even take her first breath. You were punished for not working fast enough, your body treated as something to be controlled and corrected. They forced you into the ground, protecting the pregnancy not for your sake, but for profit. Still, you lost her. Now there is another child coming, and deep inside, you already understand how this will end. You will not raise this child. You will not watch them grow. You will not hear them call your name. Because in this system, you are not seen as a mother. You are something else, something stripped of humanity. A function, a role, a body that produces. This is Virginia in the early 1840s, and what is happening to you is not hidden. It is not illegal. It is not even considered unusual. It is part of a structured and accepted system. After the United States banned the importation of enslaved people in 1808, many believed it marked the beginning of the end of slavery. Instead, it marked the beginning of something even more calculated. Without ships bringing people from Africa, enslavers turned inward. They began to rely on forced reproduction to maintain and expand their labor force at the same time. The demand for labor was growing rapidly. Cotton had become one of the most valuable crops in the world. Vast fields stretched across the deep South, and they required an enormous workforce to maintain. The solution was not to end slavery, but to reshape it. States like Virginia, Maryland, and Kentucky began to focus less on traditional crops and more on producing enslaved people who could be sold to the expanding plantations. Further south, human lives became part of an economic strategy. Enslaved people were no longer just workers. They were assets, investments, sources of profit. Their value could be measured, calculated, and increased. Children born into slavery were seen as returns, as growth, as future labor that could be sold or exploited. Families were not protected. They were broken apart whenever it served financial interests. To maintain this system, reproduction was controlled. Young women were examined and judged based on their ability to bear children. Their age, health, and physical traits determined their value. Men were selected and forced into pairings with women they did not know. These encounters were not based on choice or connection. They were imposed, controlled, repeated. Some men were specifically chosen for this purpose and treated slightly differently. Not out of kindness, but to ensure they could continue producing. Women, on the other hand, endured constant cycles of pregnancy and loss. Many gave birth again and again, only to have each child taken from them. Over time, the emotional toll became almost unbearable. Some tried not to form attachments, knowing the pain that would follow. Others held on to love, despite knowing it would be taken away. Children could be removed at any moment. There was no warning, no time to prepare. A mother might return from hours of labor in the fields only to find her child gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just an absence that could never be filled. The system depended on this separation. It kept people isolated, controlled, and unable to resist. Markets became central to this system. Cities like Richmond turned into major centers where thousands of enslaved people were bought and sold. Individuals stood on platforms while buyers examined them, discussed their value, and placed bids. They were judged like livestock, their bodies inspected, their histories reduced to simple descriptions. Strength, age, and the ability to reproduce determined their worth. Women who had already given birth to healthy children were often seen as more valuable. Their ability to produce more children made them desirable in this system. Some were sold not only for labor, but for exploitation that extended beyond the fields. Their lives were shaped entirely by the demands placed on them between the late 18th century and the mid-19th century. Around 1 million enslaved people were forcibly moved from the Upper South to the Deep South. This mass movement tore families apart on a massive scale. Husbands were separated from wives, children from parents, siblings from each other. These separations were often permanent. Once someone was sold and sent away, the chances of ever seeing them again were almost non-existent, despite everything. Some individuals found ways to resist, even in small and dangerous ways. A few tried to take control over their own bodies, risking punishment to prevent further pregnancies. Others made desperate decisions in moments of crisis, trying to protect their children from a lifetime of suffering. These acts of resistance, though limited, showed that even in the most controlled environments, the desire for autonomy never fully disappeared. When slavery finally ended in 1865, it brought legal freedom, but it did not erase the damage that had been done. The system that had controlled and exploited so many lives collapsed, yet those who had built their wealth from it faced little to no consequences. They kept their land, their power, and their social standing. Meanwhile, those who had suffered were left to rebuild their lives without support or recognition. For many, years after emancipation were filled with searching. Parents looked for children who had been taken from them years earlier. Newspapers carried messages from people trying to reconnect with lost family members. These notices described children last seen as toddlers, now grown into adults, somewhere unknown. Each message carried hope, but most were never answered. By 1860, millions of enslaved people were living in the United States, the majority of them born into slavery within the country. Their existence was the result of a system that relied on forced reproduction and control. Their lives were shaped from the very beginning by forces beyond their control. For a long time, this part of history was not fully acknowledged. It was minimized, overlooked, or left out entirely. Yet the evidence remains in records, testimonies, and personal accounts. These stories reveal a system that was deliberate, organized, and deeply rooted in economic motives. The woman on the dirt floor is not just one person. She represents thousands of others who live through the same reality. Women who gave birth again and again, only to lose their children. Women who carried memories of faces they would never see again. Women who endured physical pain and emotional loss that cannot be fully measured. Some lived long enough to see freedom. But even then, the past did not disappear. The search for lost family members continued for years, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Many never found the answers they were looking for. What this system created was not just wealth, but generations of separation and loss. Families were broken apart again and again. Children grew up without knowing their parents. Parents lived with the constant absence of children they could not protect. This history is not just about events or numbers. It is about human lives, about people who experienced love, loss, and suffering under a system that denied their humanity. Remembering them means recognizing what they went through and understanding the lasting impact it had.